it isn't anyone saying that's not worth $1,500. That's someone saying, I don't have $1,500.
Or we don't have a buyer for $1,500 today.
Yeah.
Okay, so I really appreciate your
So
time.
thank you for.
Oh, you're welcome.
Come on to the gallery.
Yeah, enough free advertising for the gallery. No, come
Yeah,
on.
thank you.
No, thanks, Grant. I really appreciate your efforts in that regard.
Thank
So
you.
that's that.
It's a journey.
So today, we're here to talk to Gary Direnfeld and Grant Peckford regarding, what brought the whole issue up for discussion is I started talking about, it was an issue about the Conservative Party and the social conservatives and their whole lot and how confused I am as an individual.
And you cannot leave government alone, Tim.
No, I can't. And the thing is that
Putting your foot in it.
there was,
Putting your foot in it.
I put my foot in extraordinary fashion, I have to say. Thank God I had very dear friends who knew where I was at, but I seen a thing about the social right still supporting in some way conversion therapy, which is trying to make a gay person straight again. So I have a solution for that, by the way, just a little bit.
Great.
So
I've been waiting for 64
and the
years
solution
to go
is-
straight again.
if the rednecks want to do that, let's take a few rednecks and turn them gay. And then, if they think it's a successful possible thing, then we'll look at it. Otherwise, let's just,
And I better be able to make money off it.
yeah, of course. Well, yeah, they'll pay volumes, I'm sure, but,
Yeah.
so if you're
Well,
not,
live the experience.
yeah, live the
Live the
experience.
experience.
Yeah, walk in my shoes and see how you like me. So, and obviously I'm kidding, but
Yes.
conversion therapy is obviously should just be stricken from the vocabulary, stricken from the social conscience, and stricken from that basis. So, but when I was railing against it on Facebook,
As you were.
as I was, and I was calling it gender reassignment. So then you can imagine. Well, I
And you said you were against it.
and I was against it. And I was coming out.
And I thought, don't make me hunt you down with the
Yeah, those disgusting people. I can't believe how disgusting they are. And I didn't know I was talking about gay people and transgender. I was talking about the idiots who are thinking about. Well, anyway, you know the drill. And thank you too for rescuing me.
I
really.
gotta tell you, I so admire you. And the reason I admire you, Tim, is from my perspective, I find you a reasonable guy. I find you self-reflective, and I find that you will so readily accept if you put your foot in it
Oh,
and own it and correct it and be public about that. It makes you human and reasonable. So kudos to you. Right?
well, thank you for that.
I think you look. Who doesn't make mistakes? It's what do you do with them? And I thought you handled that. I don't think it could have been handled better.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I just want to jump onto that and say again, just echoing a lot of what you just said. There was nothing worse than a public insult and a private apology.
Bada bing, right on the money.
And put it out there. And quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, and certainly while I may not be quite as controversial as you are, I will say that it depends on who you
All right.
But the reality is, we, not you, but I mean, we do go, it's coming out of my mouth and I can't stop it, and so you say your piece, you make your public apology, and quite frankly, in my opinion, for what it's worth, the day's done then. You do not have to revisit
No,
that
that's
and
the whole point of being
apologize.
public and clearly. That's gotta clear up.
Yeah.
There's no ambiguity.
Yeah,
There's no fallout. It's done. Okay,
Yeah. And we have chatted many times about our shared experience,
Yep.
being survivors of child sexual abuse. Everything is a journey, and you learn
Yeah.
as you move through that journey, and that provides us with an insight and an expertise, I dare say.
Yeah.
I would hate to think we experienced that and we didn't learn anything from it.
Yeah.
And I think, your average Joe public, no disrespect, does not have that experience, and nor would I want anyone to experience that.
Yeah.
But that knowledge that comes from that, and you know this in your work as well, allows us to be part of conversations that unfortunately, as we spoke earlier when you arrived, need to continue to happen.
Yeah, they do need to.
And as an openly gay man for many, many years, and I said to Tim, I never ever painted myself a victim. I didn't know I was a victim until someone told me I was a victim. So that was an interesting twist on my journey, but I still sit back and shake my head and wonder, have we moved forward at all? At the end of the day, that we're having conversations about things like gender reassignment, which is not a gay thing.
Yeah,
It's got nothing to do with being gay.
Well, and
you would speak to that better than I would from the work that you do, but
an interesting part of that leg of that journey for all of us is the way that people like yourself and myself. Last time we talked, you talked about when we first started, you started going at your story.
Yes.
And then you got to a certain point and you had a bit of a realization that maybe you haven't really even faced it yourself.
To some degree, yes.
So as victims or survivors, I prefer survivor now. I am a survivor, I'm not a victim any longer.
Yes.
But as survivors, sometimes we aid society in keeping it because we don't want to look at it either. And so it's as much about the LGBT community learning how to have the dialogue as well, in some regards.
Yes, because I will say, and again, gay people who know me don't send me nasty emails.
Yeah.
We are not necessarily, as a community, as inclusive as we should be. We certainly have struggled for years with transgender and where they fit. Oh my God, that sounds terrible. So, yeah, I mean, I do think these conversations, these ongoing conversations, everyone needs to be part of them.
Yeah.
I want to speak for a moment about conversion therapy.
Oh yes, let's go back.
Yeah.
Only good conversation, but I want to bring it back to that only because we spoke that's what touched on our meeting.
All of it, sure.
There are people out there who don't know what conversion therapy is.
Exactly.
So conversion therapy is a view that homosexuality.
Oh, I hate that word. It's so clinical.
What should I use?
But yes, but it is. I mean,
I'm not going to change.
No, the conversation started with homosexuality.
That's it. And with the view that it is abhorrent, wrong,
yes.
A mental illness,
yes.
Something to be cured.
Yes.
And so conversion therapy arose really from far-right Christian groups.
Yes.
And that's not me slamming faith or religion, that's just a matter of fact, where they would use a number of aversive, shaming, and blaming strategies to emotionally, psychologically, and sometimes even physically try to create the conditions where someone would, in a sense, renounce their homosexuality to conform to a straight world. We know that those techniques are abusive and aversive.
Without question.
And we also know that homosexuality is well within the range of normal human life behavior and conditions. There's nothing to beat out of a person.
No.
Well, and not a choice either.
Well,
that's the biggie.
By exception, it's not a choice. It is, this is the color of my skin. These are my eyes. And if one is homosexual, gay, LGBTQ.
Oh, there's so many letters.
Yeah. I can't ever remember them all.
That is who they are. So the issue is that conversion therapy is still talked about and still practiced.
Scholars talk about it.
And it is
it's disgusting.
It is harmful and indeed dangerous
Very dangerous.
because it creates the conditions
Jeez,
for
so-
self-loathing, for self-hating, and it increases the likelihood of mental health issues. The conversion therapy.
Yes.
And those mental health issues include depression, anxiety, suicidal thought, suicide, because I can't be true to me. I can't be authentic. And so, this is why, Tim, when you inadvertently put your foot in it there.
Yeah, no, I'm really.
No, I went 20 different, I just.
Oh my God! I can't imagine you guys on the other end of that
Lord,
computer.
that is
Gee, Timmy's losing it. Timmy's losing it now.
I had to jump in because I know
Thank
you.
God.
Because I know you. That was misspoken.
Well, you know what? That's a
Period.
real.
So that's why I
That's
brought
a
it to your
great
attention.
microcosm, whatever you call
Yeah.
it, of what should take place.
Yeah.
When you
Somebody
know-
makes a mistake.
If the
they don't
conversation,
help.
this is exactly, we keep saying we need to have the conversation. If the conversation was allowed to take place, that's what would happen.
Yeah.
People would be saying the wrong thing. Somebody would jump in, no, actually, I think you're mistaken there. Do you really mean that? Like, if that was actually allowed to happen on a societal basis, we would, yeah, it's interesting, eh? when you
Well,
think about
and then if we also added the
So
other.
we shouldn't write you off,
it. No, there's hope for me yet.
right?
There's hope for me yet, eh?
Like, cancel culture. This is, we're talking
Oh
about
my
what not
God.
to do.
Yeah.
In terms of how we manage.
Yeah, let's
Back to
Hollywood didn't get a hold of that one, eh? Holy jeez, yeah. I'm a legend in my own mind.
Well, I think we all are.
Yeah. No doubt.
No one is more
Okay.
famous than I am, trust me. But it sparks all sorts of conversations,
Yeah.
because then we got into the whole, you with the friend with the homophobic experience in the workplace, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's 4 chapters in the book that's yet to be written, and I
Yeah.
thought, oh, I need to talk about that. And I said to Tim when he came in, like, when will I realize I do not need to be part of every conversation that's being stewed? But I have to be, because I am so angered by the fact that these ridiculous conversations need to continue. And ridiculous, maybe, to me, in my opinion, they're ridiculous and...
Well, this
There's
is,
always a new crop of people
Yes.
yeah, every generation.
who don't get it.
Yes.
And who, from my perspective, are listening to the wrong things being chirped in their ears.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so we have to remain vigilant, we have to remain allies, we have to remain outspoken. We have to continue calling out disinformation, racism,
Yes.
prejudice, discrimination,
Yes.
lest it take over.
And
So-
it has before, and to some degree, I think it still is, depending on who you're speaking to
Yeah, fair enough.
and what side of the border you're on.
Okay.
Not that we're gonna go there, but I mean, I think that given,
Don't get me started.
but
Yeah.
but given
Let's not get
that
south of the border.
the whole conversion therapy is part of a platform and yeah, it's ridiculous. And I think part of the challenge for me, being who I am, never mind my sexual orientation, is I have lived long enough and seen the good and the bad of the world,
And the horrific.
without question.
Yeah.
And I'm just shaking my head. And it saddens me that, I mean, I'm not going anywhere, only the good die young, but, I'm going to get old age security in December or November. And I guess my naive self at 40, when I discovered who I really was, I'd hoped that all of this might have been put to rest. And I don't want to, my runway's getting shorter as we speak,
Yeah.
but I'd really hope that different conversations would be happening more around how far we had come.
Actually, though, I think we do have different conversations.
Yeah.
I think we have come a long way. I'm reading into what you just said, that in a sense your coming out was around 40.
Well, no, it was 24.
Okay.
The actual coming out, but the being who I am.
Okay.
So it's a bigger picture
And
than my
being
sexual
comfortable in your
orientation.
skin and I can be me.
Yes.
I want to be me, right? I would like to think that because of all the education that has taken place,
Yeah.
because of folks like yourself
Yeah.
who have led the way, that it's so much easier, not for all, but for many more
Yeah.
younger persons who are emerging, discovering
Yes.
their sexual orientation and
Yes.
sexuality.
Yeah.
I would like to think that more of these young persons
Yeah.
do have an easier path to that. I
Yes.
certainly do hear that from
Yes.
young persons.
Yes.
They look at me and go, well, I just told my parents. And how did they respond? Well, they just said, who's your friend?
And-
like just,
And it's true, so I'll put my bitter, cynical old self
Yeah,
aside.
so
but
there
it is
has been
true.
change.
Yes, especially for youth.
yes, yet there remains pushback and discrimination.
I remember when my children, I remember my children realizing that their generation, it has a way better outlook on all of this stuff.
Yeah.
My daughter come home one day and she was, I don't know, 10 or 12, whatever grade she was in, and there was a conversation about it was about a problem a kid was having at school, and it turned out it was a disabled kid. And I thought it was something about the kid being teased or harassed or something. And it had nothing to do with that. And I asked my daughter, you weren't teasing that, because I didn't want my daughter to be like that.
No.
And she looked at me like, man, like I had two heads, like, where did that come? And right there I realized, like, it wasn't even in their spirit of thought it was a really neat thing for me at that
But
time.
I remember how, like you,
Yeah.
it would have played out in my school.
Exactly right. It would have been about a disabled kid being teased about
Yeah.
being disabled. And it had nothing to do with that. And she looked at me like, wow, man, where did that come from? It was kind of cute, actually. So,
Well, and we are discovering, I think, children, we have always said children are stronger than we've ever given them credit for, and then we use words like resilience and so
Yeah.
it goes and so it goes. But the reality is, just to go back to a point you made, I was in an informal meeting with someone last week whose 11-year-old daughter didn't come out to dad, but went to the stepmom and began the conversation. And he kind of stood there and said, do I go to her? Like, will I embarrass her if I go to her and try and start a conversation? I want to be supportive, but I don't know what to do.
that's amazing. That's
And I just
amazing.
thought, you are doing what you need to do, and that's yes, you're having a conversation with someone who's been around for a bit, but you're having that conversation with yourself. That dialogue is.
Well, just
is
that he
happening
would-
with you.
That he would
wants-
have that dialogue internally.
Yes.
In a kind way. In a kind way and in
And
a...
struggling with, how do I embrace my child and let them know that they're loved?
Yes.
This is a wonderful
Yes.
inner struggle and dialogue.
Yes. And interestingly enough, this gentleman is of a culture where that would even be more of a challenge. So I think the piece for the 11-year-olds, because I think the first trans, Roger sent us out to York Pride a couple of years ago. We filmed the parade, and 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I'm gonna say 2 years ago, and that's when the conversation about trans really started happening, and we were seeing that it was younger and younger and younger. And so I'm gonna say she was maybe 11, and just the conversation I was having with this individual, and I thought, I was lost for words, because I thought, you really know who you are.
And they're so informed, thank you,
Oh my
Internet.
gosh.
This is.
Well,
my
Dr.
first-
Google,
Well,
yes.
But there's a dark side to the internet,
Yes.
there's a good side to the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah.
And so, young persons, children who feel different than mainstream,
Yes.
they have a way to access information now to normalize and legitimize
Yes.
and validate who they are.
Yeah.
And
3 excellent words. Love
Yep.
that. Yes.
and that's a good thing.
Yes.
That's a good thing.
Because growing up, there's enough BS that you're dealing with without adding another layer. And I think, and this goes back to the conversation we had, that wonderful video that we shot that still goes all over the place about me coming out, and how it's not about the parent. Like, the conversation needs to be the collective, but these kids just have it all together, comparatively speaking. I mean, I'm twice divorced,
Right.
a victim of child sexual abuse for a number of reasons. That's a whole other
Kettle of fish,
conversation. But when I look at the layers that were added and added and added to just trying to grow up and survive.
Through shame and blame. That is,
I mean,
societally.
But and twice divorced. Did those females need to go through that? Excuse me, with me. That was the cycle of life, I guess. But again, and we were talking about this when you came in. It's like all of this is not just impacting one individual. Just the fallout still is enormous.
In my practice, I routinely see parents who are arguing about their child's gender, about their child's sexual orientation,
Yes.
Where the issue just isn't the child. When I say just, the issue is not the child. The issue is the parent's response.
Well, it isn't usually.
So I'm
It's the parent's
curious.
response.
I know part of it not letting you get away.
Helping them come around to understanding
Yeah.
normal human sexuality and the range.
So, I'm thinking about the bullheaded old guy that would come in and say, "Can you straighten this kid out for me, please?" What do you tell?
I get that.
What do you do? What do you do?
They come in, I say, look, before I meet with your kid, I better meet with you first.
Yeah,
And we have a real long, lengthy, look, the way I work, it's not the standard 15-minute hour. I set 3-hour appointments because you can't cram these important discussions into the standard 15-minute hour.
Well, because you know when you get there, you've just got into the meat and the potatoes of the discussion.
I don't understand traditional therapy. Anyways, whole other discussion.
Yeah.
yeah,
But I always work with the parents first.
yeah, of
You
course.
have to. You have to understand where they're coming from and their value base, their sense of morality and their sense of what decency or normal is. And then, we have to see how does that match your child and what
Yeah.
your child's needs and experiences, and what might you benefit from in terms of your information and education.
Yeah,
And that is, I've got to jump in there. There's a whole idea of having that conversation with the parent before you speak with the child. I was in grade 9, became infatuated with my grade 9 English teacher. And unfortunately, much of that infatuation, I felt the need to put pen to paper, which my mother, God rest her soul, found. We won't even go, why was she snooping around looking for things, but that was,
Yeah.
the 60s, it was a different time. And so it was a 2-part approach. One was get him to the psychiatrist,
Get him to therapy.
psychiatrist.
Yeah.
But before then, it was take him to the school where the teacher worked and sit him down with the principal of the school and force him to have a conversation about what happened.
oh, that's brutal.
So just
Shame, right, shut it all off, the only way you can survive.
Complete denial. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I went into the therapist. I guess it was a therapist. It would have been a psychiatrist, or maybe it was. And it was, what are you talking about? I'm sure I sat there with my legs crossed like this, looking every inch a gay man.
Yeah.
And quite indignant, I'm sure, as I'm clutching my breasts now.
Well, first of all, I so appreciate you shared that story.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't shared that in many, many years.
I so appreciate that. It is a much more common kind of story,
Yeah,
even today, than
Yeah.
you would imagine. And I get those kinds of calls from parents regularly, meet with my kid. And I have long since learned you don't meet with the child without having met with parents first.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's going to come from the child. Typically, hey, the child, first of all, when they're told go to therapy, their expectation is somebody's gonna wag a bigger finger at them.
And I think he did.
Who wants to go to that?
I think he did.
Okay, so therapy is made into a pseudo punishment in the mind of a child.
Yeah.
You need to work with the parents first. You have to understand where they're coming from. And if you're going to meet with the child, you have to have a plan on board with the parents that they're going to appreciate what may or may not be discussed.
Yes.
How it's going to be discussed.
Yes.
And the value base of the therapist in those discussions.
Yeah.
So not only does the therapist need to check out the parent first, the parent needs to check out the therapist and make sure that our values are somewhat aligned and appropriate to the circumstance.
So that's where I have to go back and say, gosh, we have grown. We have really moved forward, because there was no, the mom and the stepfather taking the teenager to the therapist to fix him.
Well, look, that still does go on.
Well, yeah.
Okay, there are a good many therapists that will happily accept the referral of the child not having met with the parents.
Yeah.
And I have ever felt that's the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
Okay, just
Yes.
in this aspect of it, I have very little to put in here, and I have a reason for that, and that is because I value the discussion that you two would have on this issue, and I believe it's much more needed. So, but one thing I did want to put in, my constant attempts about the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party
Yes.
is to get a hold of the extremes, the conversion therapists,
Yes.
and the left extremes that can't wait to do surgery on a 7-year-old that they believe is identifying already.
Right, yes.
Okay, so let's get those guys in, eliminate that. That's my goal. I'm not a conservative or a liberal.
Yeah.
It's those policies on both ends that I go after.
Yeah.
In the interest of making those adjustments to both parties, because I think we need both parties. I don't think there is one. So, in my defense, that's why that's what I'm always railing for, is against the extremes. And it's where this stuff comes from, on both ends.
Yes.
The extreme for the conversion therapy, anything nasty comes from the negative end on the very far right, Christian, whatever you want.
Yeah.
However, those Christian extremists give Christians a bad name.
Yes.
And the extreme left that go with no limits on that end of the scale are no different to me. And so those are who I go after, and to affect some change. If you have a delusion of being able to affect any kind of a change, that would be it.
I think in every conversation we have, unless we make complete a-holes of ourselves,
Yep.
we have the ability to affect change in people's
I
lives.
think so.
I mean, I can certainly say that very rarely, when I'm focused and engaged, do I not say something that I feel will have a positive impact on the
That's
lives
why
of
I'm here
people.
today. I am
Exactly.
hoping, Tim, thank
Yeah.
you for the invitation.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that this discussion affects change for those who need this change.
Yeah.
And if one person listens to it, and they go, yeah, and then so,
Sure.
you don't know,
I have been a social worker for 38 years and not believe that people can change.
it's a pebble in the pond, You drop the pebble in the pond and you don't
Yeah.
know where the
Yeah.
ripples go.
Well, and I think, Tim, to go back to the political piece, which we need to be careful about that.
I don't think so.
My irritation around that piece is whether a 7-year-old or a 70-year-old is looking at gender reassignment,
Right.
conversion therapy, homophobia in the workplace, it should not be a political platform.
100%, I think that
Either way.
both,
It should not, come
Yeah.
on.
The
That doesn't mean the
extremes-
conversation stopped. It's just, you want to get
Those are
real.
not political issues.
Exactly.
Yeah, they should-
Those are true human,
Yes.
and the people, they're evil, in my estimation, they're evil
Yeah.
on extremes that seek to use political to control issues that shouldn't be political. And they use the political power to control societies.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's absurd. Like, whether a person's gay, whether a person's trans, whatever they are. Who gives a damn? Let them be who they are, and whatever, that's my take on it. And with children, I do have a personal bent on it, and that is, let them be however they're gonna be, and then let them, when it comes to surgery and that kind of stuff, let them make those decisions when they're more, as opposed to parents influencing them, because it's a parental influence again. And a parental influence in that regard is no less serious than a parental influence in a negative regard, like as far as not gender reassignment, but conversion therapy.
Conversion therapy.
When a parent brings a child to you, say, yeah, can you fix this child there, Gary? He thinks he's gay. Can you straighten that out for me? I mean, there are people that literally think like that.
Well, it's true, and I think, well, again, I've always been very clear. The whole region knows I'm like, I've never wanted to be a parent. Would I be a good parent? Maybe, I don't know.
Probably.
Now,
you'd be an amazing parent.
At 25, would be like, excuse me, you're just irritating me, get away.
Well, based on who you are, though, based on who you are and who you are today, and what I know about you, if you'd have made that decision then, you would have done the right thing. You would have said, okay, there's some stuff I have to figure out here. You would have done it.
Yeah.
For who you are,
Maybe
100%.
Yeah.
I think I'm a little confused and
I'm selfish, self-centered, self-involved, that's nothing
Well,
new.
then you don't need, well, then you are a kid, what do you mean?
Well, I never had a childhood because I was a victim.
Well, me either, I'm
Yeah,
having my childhood right now, I'm
yeah.
having my childhood right now, that's categorical, yeah,
But
I'm enjoying it.
But I think with because I want to give a shout out to parents who just don't know, the idea that they have this child who is in some way through the lens they're looking at their child broken or struggling, and just that overwhelming desire to fix that. And I use that word for a reason, but without understanding what it is they're trying to fix, and without speaking to someone who knows from where they speak, they just muddy the waters even more. So I love the fact that you're very, very clear that conversation with that parent who is struggling just because they don't know. I've had so many gay friends over the years who blame their entire tortured childhood excuse me, on their parents. I'm drinking wine with them at the age of 40 and we're still having that conversation. It's like my mom said, and I shared this with Tim, it's like when you were born, they weren't handing out a book that said, here's this situation. I mean, as I said, when I came out, my mother cried for 6 months. We talked about this in the video. It's like, but only out of the frustration of not seeing what she felt she should see.
the truth is, for most parents, particularly first-time parents, it is scary.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that's like.
I know. It's like, oh my God, I'm responsible for a life. In literal sense, I am responsible that this thing grows, lives, thrives. And it's for many a very overwhelming experience. There is a range of experience with which parents come to parenting with based on their own upbringing. So some are certainly better equipped than others by virtue of their growing up experiences. And so, we have to appreciate that for the most part, parents are well-intentioned. They misinformed, but well-intentioned.
The nugget that I took, I take little nuggets from everything I run across, and there's certain things I remember. And there's a book I read by Ron Smotherman, his name was, out of California. It's called Winning Through Enlightenment. And it's one of the self-awareness books that come out over the years. And I actually loved it so much, I bought 300 copies or whatever it was and sent them to every member of Parliament in Canada. That was in 1989.
Only you.
I did.
Well, you are, because if I had that kind of money, I'd have bought you fake.
What I thought was, if I could raise the level,
That's right. I mean, it is extraordinary. And
if you could raise the level of enlightenment by 5%, who gets to do that for the whole nation? So I really believe that. So anyway, what the nugget that I was getting to before I got sidetracked was that his take on, parenting, and as an adult thinking about what your parents owed you or owe you, his take was they owe you nothing.
Right.
They did the best. If they got you to 16 years old, fed, and they did their job the best they could for who they were.
Yes.
And when I think of the mistakes, it wasn't mistakes I made parenting. It was my shortcomings as an individual, my drug use, when my kids were a little bit old, when I finally had given into that, before I got into my therapy for my adult survivor issues.
Yeah.
But somehow, through their mother, God love her, she somehow kept everything on a straight and narrow for enough years that everybody came through it okay. But your parents owe you nothing. If they got you to 16 years old, fed, you're done. You know, you're responsible after that. You have to take responsibility for, and cut yourself a break too. I mean, the things that you do, if it's an honest quest, you'll get there. Anyway, that was just that part on that issue of parenting. If they get you to 16, they did the best they could for who they were. Your mom,
But I do
my
want to
parents,
differentiate. They did the best they could
for who they were
for who they were.
at the time.
It doesn't mean that one must still put oneself in an abusive
Oh, under no circumstances.
relationship or situation with one's parents.
No, of course not.
So while we can understand, it is not to condone or excuse.
Yeah.
So
Oh, no.
just to make that differentiation.
That is in relation to my own self, thinking about my parents and how much I cry about what I went through, and it's their fault. It wasn't. No. They did the best they could for who they were, and recognizing that, you know, people that grew up.
And now it's your turn to do the best.
Now it's
that
my
you
turn
want.
to be as little of a jerk as I can be.
You're gonna have to learn them.
Yeah,
But you look at your children, we've talked about this,
Yeah.
your children are good people.
decent human beings.
And a decent human being, let me tell you, if I died tomorrow and both of you gentlemen said, yeah, he was hysterically funny and was fabulous, but underneath all of that, he was a decent human being, then all of
Yeah.
what we experience and that we share, and some of the horror stories that you have lived through and what you do for, it's all worth it.
Yeah.
It truly, truly is, because I think it is hard enough to be a decent human being, never mind trying to add a whole bunch of other layers to that for it
Yeah.
to make some sense of it. I had a young man from India. I was doing training last Friday night, and he was a tutor and I'm going to be a mentor around working with children with learning disabilities. And at the end of the session, and we do a little chit chat, he said, I'm listening to you, Grant, and I'm feeling your energy. And he said, what can you share with me from your life experience that will make my tomorrow better than my today? I thought, well, if I wasn't wearing so much makeup, I would be crying like a baby. But I'm a contracted service provider, even though I'm invested in this agency. And I'm just doing my job, and somehow, some way, something's coming from me,
Right.
which is my life experience. And some stranger just says to me, oh my God, like, what is it you've got that you could share that would make my life better? And I'm thinking, oh, if you knew my life, like, please, if you knew what happened 5 minutes before I came online. So, yeah, I think the point I was trying to make, among 40,000 other ones, is cut yourself some slack. As a parent or as a child who's made mistakes, and I often say in many of my trainings, welcome to the human race. So who suggested that you should be any different than who you are?
So, in that
That was
regard,
deep.
just to address just a little bit more fully.
Yes, to why you invited us.
No, this is wonderful, wonderful conversation to be had, and I'm grateful to have it. On looking back on parents, on the point that we were discussing, it's only in the context of putting a bunch of onus on what they should have done, what they, and it's their fault. But that I'm like in that respect, parents did the best they could for who they were.
Yes.
Dad was an alcoholic. Mom was always working. Whatever. 8 kids. Whatever. There's a whole bunch of reasons, and if your parents were unreasonable, if they were recognize them for who they are. It's more about recognizing things for the way that they were, as opposed to placing a lot of, well, it's all their fault, and then blah, 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 blah. They owe you nothing. When they got you to 16, they're done. And it's not to get out of reality, I think was what you were talking about. You have a right to be pissed, if you excuse the expression, at the way that your father treated you, or the way that your family address things.
It's a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like, I think it has to do with staying in reality about things, because you can get off on feeling, like really feeling sorry for yourself, and then you get off on tangents.
I only worry that
Well, I knew there was a worry there, that's why I come back to it.
that the understanding of the parent isn't used to excuse the behavior or to dismiss the impact on that.
No, absolutely
child.
not. It's like saying my abuser, oh, well, he must have had problems too. And
Yes.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I went through this one Cuban guy that I interviewed, that he did a positive message for me. Really intelligent kid. I love him to death. I've known him for years. I bought him a saxophone because
Of course you
he had a conservatory. No, he had 7 years.
Surprised you didn't buy 500.
He had 7 years in the conservatory, but didn't have his own saxophone. And his dad was a driver that used to come and get me all the time. So, but not the family today. They're dear friends. They're like family. His grandmother played me an opera one day, and she just with her broken old voice. It was so cool. But my point was, when he was giving me his message, he started talking about the offender in the sense that they must have had issues too, so they must have went through some, and I heard forgiveness coming out of it. And the hair went up on the back of my neck, and so later I got a hold of him, I said, can you really clarify that? Because forgiving, there is part of the whole process that it comes to that. But sometimes as a survivor, you want to do it too quickly just to get it all behind you, and then you're not dealing with it.
Yeah.
And so if that's the reason, it's not not necessarily healthy. And for my own self, the forgiveness for my offenders, one specifically it just occurred to me one day, okay, I'm there now, like I actually don't, so excusing the behavior, like you say, that's exactly, like if you're just using that to excuse the behavior, I don't believe in that either.
Good.
All righty, so anyway, we beat that one to death. So,
I wouldn't want to be a parent in today's day and age, because you are dealing with those, the trans and the 9,000 letters and the confusion of, just as I spoke to earlier,
The
just
complexity of life is different now.
it's so
It
different.
so it feels.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think the what is not an unrealistic expectation of someone who chooses to be a parent is enormous compared to what it was, because the complexity of being a confused young person is just, it's not as simple as, I mean, not for me being gay, straight, or somewhere in between. I don't want to minimize how that impacted my life from, I guess I knew probably at the age of 9, to being almost 65. I don't want to minimize that, because, gosh, I wish I could redo some of that stuff knowing what I know now. But it almost was with the parent, gay or straight. It was
A binary.
it was as simple, for the lack of a better word, as that. It was you were one or you the other.
And
it was
99% are going to be here.
Yes. And there wasn't all of those other pieces. So, no, I'm just thinking about this 11-year-old girl. It's like, well, what is being trans? What does that mean? Because then there's a sexual piece into that, which, frankly, no 11-year-old should be looking at. But I mean, it's just so much more complicated. If I could have said at 9 years of age, which I could have, this is who I am, and this is who I'm choosing to love, whatever that looks like. Oh my gosh.
So let me uncomplicate it for parents.
Because I'm so
I was hoping for some input in regards to what would you tell parents?
Here's what I tell parents. First of all, you have to understand that human sexuality is on a continuum.
Yeah.
It's not on a binary.
Yeah.
There is so much in between. There are so many differences between one person and the next, from orientation to identity to sexual preference to how their body has actually physiologically
Yes. It's another piece.
right come together. We have intersex that isn't spoken about. So the message to parents is, and it's sometimes sounds trite, but it's just love your kid. Accept your kid, and if they don't know who they are and you don't know who they are, then say, you'll find out. With a sense of a positive anticipation. Like, I don't know what butterflies can emerge from this cocoon.
No.
And whatever it is, I'm going to take pleasure in. What a wonderful message
Yeah,
to provide.
And it's so
Your
simple, which is why we have to go up with, but it is. I mean, I do, while I am cynical, I do believe we all get to where we need to be.
When we look at the mental health of children and we differentiate, why is this child struggling and this child not? Underneath everything that we've discussed, the more defining issue is the degree to which a child feels valued and accepted. Story done.
And thank you for that, because in the training that I'm doing, and it was easier when I was doing it face to face because you could see, that's the message. That is what I try to get. Because getting into all of the mental illnesses and good mental health and bad, I mean, it's just a conversation that goes on forever. But I say to those 10 young people, make sure they're being heard, that you validate and
Value them.
value.
I care about you. You aren't worth my caring about.
Regardless.
Yeah. And you know what? That is therapy.
Yes.
That helps this child to feel important, whole, respected, cared for, and it's with that they can go out into the world.
100%.
And does that, and I ask this in your professional capacity, does that not just then start the conversation that needs to happen
Yeah.
in terms of growth?
You know, and parents, don't think in terms of fixing your child. Think in terms of how can I support you through that?
Yes. Yeah.
How can
I
I
hate
support
that
you?
word.
How can I support you through that, sweetheart?
Yeah.
Because when we say fix, it denotes there's something wrong with you. If you say, how can I support you with that? It is future-oriented, it's positive, it says, I care about you,
Yeah.
and I'm here for you and we will do this. How can I support
It's
you with
really,
this?
really odd to me.
Just give me chills.
That's exactly right. And what's really odd to me, that same philosophy or that same train of thought actually applies to the entire spectrum from 2 years old to 100.
Yeah, how can I support you
You
with
know,
that?
gay, straight,
Please let's
lesbian.
stop
What,
complicating.
yeah, like what the hell? Who cares how they're behaving? Let's find out why. If they need anything, can I help you with that? Are you okay? Do you need, like, why isn't that just a philosophy for everybody and everything? Like,
Under so much distress is an unmet need.
yeah, that's a whole other segment, Gary, thanks.
I want 4 chapters that
Well,
have
actually,
written books
Gary and I
like
have talked
that.
about doing a segment on therapy itself because a lot of people probably have misconceptions about it, and a full clarification of just how simple it actually is and how useful. I liken it to emotions are like a foreign language to some of us, and the therapist, the interpreter. Like that's really.
I like that analogy.
You know, I'm a big fan of it. When I made the adult choice to do it, I thought, wow, this is going to be great. And then when I discovered that I had not once, but twice been referred to the wrong therapist for me,
You really need to find the right one.
because
that's
I
for
walked
sure.
in and was running those sessions within 10 minutes.
Yeah,
But the concept of having that opportunity, I'll speak just for myself, but to go in and just go bleh, and let it all come out, and I don't have for it to make sense, but that I have that practitioner or that expert, I will say, or that individual with the expertise to help me make some sense of it. Like, to me, that's just, to your point, that is a win-win situation, and God love you for having the energy and the patience.
Oh, and I don't know
Because
how.
I wasn't easy.
Let me,
just-
I use a word, it's fun. I know that may sound crazy.
No, but I can see that.
Typically therapy with me isn't a slog, and how does that make you feel like you shit? But like, I know how you feel, how could you not feel shit?
Yeah.
So let's not go there, but now what are we gonna do different, and what's happened, and how are we gonna use that? And the reason I say it's fun is because people come in at their worst and they leave at their best.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
I love what I did.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's key, because I can tell you I've done many things over the years for the almighty dollar that I haven't wanted to do. But I get that, not only as when I was the WW wellness coach, because everyone hung on my every word, so that fed whatever ego apparently I have or don't have, but just that when you see that light bulb go off,
It's exciting.
it's just like, oh, and that goes back to what I was saying to you
Like,
earlier, where,
goosebumps.
wow, I've affected
That's-
something.
Those are
some change.
goosebumps moments.
Yes.
Those who follow me on Facebook every now and again, one of my posts is, this is what happened.
Okay.
This was the outcome, and then the last word of my post is goosebumps.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's wonderful.
yeah, it's good. It's neat. I liken it to an old woman told me one time. Metaphors are the bridges to our soul, and it's where someone uses an analogy, totally unrelated, but the analogy. But because of the way they use the analogy, then I get it. And then that feeling. That's a metaphor. That's a bridge to your soul.
Yeah.
That's this old woman told me.
Lovely, lovely saying.
Yeah, that's I
Lovely
get
saying.
amazing stuff about old women. They're always telling me, they're always trying to fix me, and I finally, some of it rubbed in, some of
You're
it
not broken, you may be a little bit, but you're
little
not
bent, but not broken. Well, I bend, but I don't break.
But I mean, there's life experience too. I mean,
Yeah,
that is
absolutely.
that journey, whatever it looked like, and we don't know what that
Wisdom to me
journey
is the ability to change over time.
Yeah,
Oh,
If
yes.
we're not continually changing and adapting and learning,
yeah,
you don't know wisdom.
no.
And, as you do that, you have more to share with someone else. My brother uses the phrase, well, if you want to know what a 50 or 60-year-old person thinks, ask a 50 or a 60-year-old. So if you're a younger person, borrow their experience and wisdom.
Yeah,
And I think that's quite right.
I think it's common sense, quite frankly. There was a shortage of that
it
today.
boggles
I
my mind. It
understand.
boggles my mind when I watch my son, he's 40, and he's got his house and his kids, and the way him and his wife decide everything drives me crazy, because they're really attentive to all the needs of every single thing and all the considerations, and I'm old school. It's like, this is what we're gonna do, you got it? That's where I come from.
And
my
you've
father-
married how many times? No judgment, just
Yeah,
simple
ask any one of my
question.
6 wives, they'll tell you I'm not a bad guy. So, and I stand by that. And
But that's generational.
well, 6 wives, you know what that tells you?
You already had 6.
From my point of view, I'm a slow learner, but I'm not a quitter. That's the best, that's the most positive spin I can put on it.
Well, no, but it's like when I hear people say, I'm a practicing homosexual.
Yeah. You aren't good at it yet?
What part? That's usually in the context of and I'm not going to talk religion, but I remember it was a gay man I worked with at a fabulous gay bar before I even came out in Toronto, and he was a very strong Catholic in terms of his faith. And
Yeah.
so he went to his priest with this dilemma, because he'd been in a relationship with a woman who he genuinely loved. I mean,
Yeah.
their energy, their synergy.
You can love and be homosexual,
Yeah,
come on.
it was fabulous.
right?
But she wanted to go in a direction that he knew in his heart he couldn't. So he went to his priest, and the priest said, well, it's okay as long as you're not a practicing homosexual. And he came back and said, what do I do with
That's hilarious,
that?
that's hilarious.
And-
You know what I've been doing lately? It's this, some funny experiences in relation to, a heterosexual man telling another heterosexual man, I love you. Well, I've been doing it lately.
Good.
I do that all the
Good.
time.
Well, I know, but I've been doing it lately as,
friends.
well, just, for
I would
example,
have kissed you both on the cheek if there wasn't a
but,
pandemic.
but the funny thing is, though, is that, you know, old school guys, which all my friends are, of course. So what happens is, everybody feels that, whether how strict you are or not, everybody actually feels that love. You know, Martin Nash, for example, has been a dear friend of mine. He was in 1982, he was my broker, and he's been my conscience ever since. If I check with Martin, he said, "Oh, you're not too far off, Tim." And so, last thing I said to him was, "Oh, I love you, Martin. See you soon, eh?" And two men that are heterosexual and old school, they go, "Yeah, I love you too, man, bro," and then your voice deepens a little bit. And you go, manly, a couple of manly things and a couple of manly things, and yeah, okay, you see, bro.
And then we can hang out.
Best we can do, though.
Yeah.
But it doesn't diminish the fact that we do love each other. Yeah, so there you go. That's my positive take on.
Well, and the reality is too, I mean, certainly in many Eastern European cultures, I mean, my father-in-law, God rest his soul, from the Ukraine, when the Ukraine was Russia, kissed all of us, even me when I came into the family, kissed us on the lips, hello and goodbye.
I'm that way. I've been that way with mine. I'm that way with our son.
Yeah. Told us he loved us.
Yeah.
We never left the house without him saying, and it was just, again, because my journey was different. I mean, I didn't see that as the norm, but I realized for John that was the norm, and while he certainly was a strict parent, it was a weird contrast. It was, I struggled initially with this man who was telling the wife, this is the way it's going to be, and the children, you're going to do what I tell you to do, or you're going to move out.
Here's the list.
But there was, in the next breath, there was that, and I just thought, for me, because parenting was very black and white, I struggled with that for so many years, because I thought, how can you be that over there that in today's world is bad, for lack of a better word, but you never, regardless of the heated conversations that we would have as a family at the dinner table, you would tell us you loved us and kiss us, and off we would go feeling like all was well in the world, and don't we want that for our children?
Yeah, I'm just finishing up a song now. My father never told me that he loved me. He thought I knew. And it goes on about how that transcends generations and stuff, but anyway.
It's a wonderful gift
So can I get a final?
To tell them that they do love you.
A final...
We're all over the map, I love
No, I'm happy to be all over. I'll go all over any map with either one of you anytime, night or day. I don't mind that at all. So, but if I could get a final word as a professional to members of the public, what would you tell them right now?
Accept your kids for who they are, love them, value them. If you see that they are struggling, don't make an assumption. You can ask, are you struggling? What can I do to help you, sweetheart?
Great. Grant?
It's as simple as that. For me, I would say really the understand yourself and accept yourself. I mean, I'm saying that as a man who's struggled with that for many, many years, and I think that for many men of my generation who still to some degree struggle with it, really your focus should be just learning to understand yourself, and that will translate to whatever it needs to for you to accept who you are. And if you understand yourself and you need that additional support, you know that. But it really is, again, it goes back, loving yourself and accepting who you are. And sometimes, you just throw your hands in the air, it's a bit of a crapshoot, and everything lands where it lands, and tomorrow's another day.
Beautiful.
Before you sign us off,
Yes?
I want to express my appreciation
Yes.
for bringing us together,
Yes.
allowing this conversation, facilitating the conversation, And to both you, Tim, and you, Grant, I do love you both.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Love you too, and I love you too, Grant.
Thank you, love you. Yeah, but these conversations,
Some redneck out there is gonna be watching this, they're having a love fest.
Then
And you know what? They're right.
Well, no, because then they're gonna say, oh God, there's that gay guy.
Yeah, there's a big guy, he's
Rogers."
converting them, he's converting them for
That's
sure.
it. He's
So remember
gay
on the
pushing.
conversion therapy, we're gonna convert some rednecks into gays and, that's my final note. If they're worried, we got a new program coming out, conversion therapy, rednecks into gays, if you're interested, call me. I have nothing that I could possibly add to what these two said, I agree with it all, and I'm grateful for your time, that you took the time, and I appreciate it, and I'm quite sure we'll be looking forward to doing this again sometime
Oh,
soon.
for sure.
So, if you can look and say goodbye and
Bye.
hit your little red button,
Hit my little red button.
yeah? And if you
Okay.
could do the same, Gary,
Bye, all.
Oh, my little red button.
and I think we can wrap it up.